part of why this is important is that art is expensive in games, usually. This is of course a generalization. It doesn't have to be like that, but most often this is the case. It is partly because of the high expectations the players have nowadays, the so-called next-gen consoles and so on, but to be honest, that is not the whole truth. Of course, as we get more power, we can push more polygons and so on. Of course, the artists themselves want to aim higher, and it is the other side of that coin. This is often the costliest part of game development. That 25% figure was from Gears of War 3, if I remember correctly. I think the percentage of the art and graphics in the games is actually rising, and it is one of the key reasons behind those development costs which we are facing today. The usual development budget is on an AAA title around 20 million or more. Yes, I hope I don't ruin my presentation now when I say that there really isn't any magical fix or something. It basically takes a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and just making the right choices. These are the very essential building blocks in how to achieve great looks. This limited resources thing, this isn't just about lonely indie coder in bedroom. Basically, this applies for all of us who work in the industry, no matter what company you are in. We all have deadlines, and we all want to achieve as much as possible within those boundaries. But these are the basic blocks. I will get to those in more detail later, but artistic freedom has been very important for us in Frozenbyte, and I think it's very important for those who actually do the heavy lifting, artists themselves. Choose the right visual look. I have made it big because it's a lot more important than many of the other points. It is the key decision to make. And of course the usual pipeline, and which I will last creatively, which I will cover in more detail later. Okay, so the first thing, talent and freedom. Basically, I believe in very flat hierarchy in our art team. I'm guiding our people and so on, but I try to give as much freedom to individual artists as possible, and this has worked very, very well for us. So I worked as an artist myself for many, many years, and I only recently became an art director here. So I pretty much think I know what goes inside the head of an artist and how important it is to get a chance to show your own style, own creativity and so forth. And this creativity comes from freedom. It is not just about the individual artists and what they can do. It is also the freedom we as an art team enjoy at Frozenbyte. Our management, Lauri, our CEO, and so on, gives us a lot of freedom. We can pretty much decide what we want to do. Of course, we have deadlines and so on, but as long as we can maintain our deadlines, we can pretty much do whatever we want, which is great, to put it shortly. This, in achieving great visuals, is the most important decision. Good design doesn't have to necessarily cost much. It is just an important step to take in the beginning of a project. Really think about it through, think about all the things it will have, all the implications it will have on development and so on, how it fits your type of game, what skills your team has, how unique that visual style is. And often good design actually saves money if you spend the time really thinking about it through, really thinking what it means on your development. Are you choosing 2D, are you choosing 2.5D like we did in Trine 2, or are you going full out 3D? It has a huge implication, especially when we think about how big your team is, how much it will all cost at the end. And of course, I mentioned the photorealism plus FPS third person. It is usually the worst choice you can make. If you can get by with anything else, just do it. It is generally not advisable at the beginning, at least. And one of the reasons we at Frozenbyte try to avoid the full photorealism is that it usually doesn't look that good. We are still a bit behind in both lighting and in materials, so that we really can't achieve that level of photorealism which would look good, let's say 5 years from now. I'm pretty sure that every game out there right now that is a photorealistic FPS, for example, will look like crap in 5 years. And it has been so in the past. So, kind of my tip is to avoid photorealism. Good examples of visual style that I could think of were World of Pooh, Defcon, Journey, Limbo, Trine 2, which all were had some unique style. You could identify the games as soon as you saw them, and these were very light styles. It didn't cost much. We have Defcon out the upper left, which was by Introversion Software, and I don't know the actual figures, but I guess it was a very small art team that did that game. But it had a very good atmosphere. It felt like you were in some kind of bunker playing a nuclear war, which is nice. Then we have Journey, which is probably the most expensive game of all those. But even though Journey probably did cost millions to make, it has a fantastic soundtrack, for example, which probably didn't come by very cheaply, but it had a very unique and very effective visual style, and I am pretty sure it didn't cost too much actually to create that game with that look. It probably did take a lot of planning, pre-planning, pre-production and figuring out, but at the end I believe that the actual asset production was pretty fast. We have World of Pooh by Rudy Boy, Kyle Kagler and the other guy, and it is not the most refined example of graphics in the games ever, but it was a very tight package with graphics and audio all working hand in hand, and they didn't make any mistakes in it and so on, so it was very well executed. And of course the Limbo, which had a very distinct black and white style. Most of these games are, except Journey, from very small or indie studios, so this by necessity have been made by a very tight budget. They have succeeded very well. You can, I return to my previous slide, you can spend millions of dollars on a game, and it can look worse than some of those indie games, and mainly it is because of those choices in the early beginning of the development, where you have gone through photorealism, for example, or just haven't thought the uniqueness, your unique look of the game too much. There are a lot of games out there that basically look kind of good, but you can't tell them apart. what we did in Trine 2 was a recognizable colorful style. It sounds easy, but it wasn't. Most of the style we were after was developed during the development stages of Trine 1. And there's a really good article in Gamma Sutra about our development and the difficulties we faced there. If you are interested, I urge you to read it. It is quite honest, and the reality was even worse. So we had about 5, 6 bit different styles, looks we were trying to create. Our company was a mess at the time, and through many happy accidents and so on, we finally kind of ended up in our final look, which was doesn't mean, but we in trying to, of course, there's a lot of saturation. We focused a lot on lighting, but there's also semi-realistic surfaces and a bit magical fantasy touches in shapes and so on. And this came together in a quite late stage development of Trine 1. We learned a lot from it. We basically wasted a lot of money before we knew what we were after. So in Trine 2, it was actually pretty easy for us. We knew what we were doing, so we could focus solely on that. And the hard work was already done in Trine 1. Trine 1 would have looked a whole lot better if we had had the opportunity to spend some time and think about what we were after, but the whole project changed so much during the years that it didn't work out that way. But we finally achieved a style, a look that I think is recognizable. You usually can recognize Trine 2 from other games if you see screenshots. Maybe because your eyes will bleed from all that saturation or something. But we decided to do 3D assets and 2D cutscenes. The reason we did that choice was our team, what skills we had, how many of us were doing it, and so on. We have at the moment 9 artists at Frozenbyte. We have Juhani, who is Juhani Jokinen, very skilled concept artist, and he was the reason we ended up in 2D cutscenes. Actually, he and Ilkka. Ilkka is our animator, and at the moment he is our only animator, so it was very clear for us that we can't do actual 3D cutscenes with some kind of blur quality and so on. So we ended up in 2D cutscenes. Juhani painted them, I did some After Effects for those, and that reason came from our team. Also the 3D assets decision came straightly from our skill sets. We have a lot of talented 3D modelers, but very few 2D people. So it was obvious for us that we want to take advantage of those skills. And the funny part is that in some reviews, people have thought that in Trine 2 we have these matte paintings in the background, but the truth is Juhani just didn't have time for those, so it is all 3D. The most important decision probably we did with Trine was the 2.5D perspective, and we are very, very proud of what we achieved in the looks department of Trine 2, but the truth is we could not have been able to pull that off if we would have done all 3D. Choosing a 2D perspective enabled us to fake a lot of things, recycle assets more freely. It basically enabled us to do what we wanted with visual style. There's a lot of things you can recycle, a lot of things you can use mystical workarounds and so on, when the player doesn't get to see behind the objects and so forth. We also decided that we want to do very few assets. Well, we don't want to do very few assets, we want to do as much as possible, but we want to maintain a very high quality in individual assets in trying to. It was a decision partly because of my past as an artist. I always hated myself doing these useful and needed but boring props, kind of basic building blocks, ground assets, tileable models, block sets, and so forth. And I think every artist enjoys a whole lot more when he can do some kind of hero asset, and with every asset take a attitude that it will be good enough to go to his personal portfolio, for example. So that was partly because we wanted to keep people motivated and so that people would have fun building the assets. And why we could do that was partly because of our level artist Trine, who is a genius in recycling assets and finding out clever ways to creatively use very few assets in very different looking ways. I will get to that later. Lots of variation was something we wanted to explore more in Trine 2. Trine 1 was a project that didn't go as well as we had hoped regarding the design process. We knew that there are things we like to do better, and the variation was one of them. And of course, with our resources, it had to be cheap. I will get to that later now. Okay. So, pipeline, this is the boring stuff, but it just has to work. Right people at the right places. We have excellent support staff at Frozenbyte. So basically, we as artists can focus solely on creating art and assets. Our tech supports handles all the pipelines, installations, and such, and we just play with our packages. Prioritizing. It is basically my job most of the time. I try to prioritize what kind of assets we need in our levels and which assets should be made first. But part of that is the flexibility. I try to prioritize the assets we need most to the beginning so that we could have some time left at the end of our each individual schedule regarding one level's art. So that when people are having ideas during the development and when we are seeing the level, we could actually be able to create those ideas in reality. And of course the up-to-date engineering tools. Someone in earlier presentation said something about using your own engine to achieve a own look or something, and we have done it, and it has worked for us. I try to be very fast here. This is actually the interesting part. Sorry. Recycle as many assets as possible. If you are tight on budget, don't try to recreate everything you need. Just do something and let the level artist figure it out. That's what we do, and hopefully with the talented level designer it will work. Recycle as many assets as possible, but as few themes as possible, which is kind of a paradoxical. But with so-called big modeling, sikamodelaus suomeksi, you are able to take a model asset which have been created earlier and just take bits and pieces out of everything and cobble them together and make a bridge out of building and so on. This is something we did a lot in Trine 1 and also in Trine 2. Retexturing, it goes back to the first point where you should recycle as many assets as possible, but in as few things as possible. For example, our snow levels were basically all using the same assets as our previous levels. we just had a quick texturing pass on those. Rotate 90 degrees and stuck to the wall is the part where the genius level designer, level artist comes in. So you have one block and you use creatively. Variation in Trine 2, these are basically the things we were after: dynamic lighting, dynamic weather. They are kind of cheap solutions, cheap as in development time. It of course takes some time to code all these features, but when we are doing assets, they enable us to create a lot more variation than would otherwise be possible. Different color themes in and between levels. We tried to, there's actually a somewhat logical day and night cycle in Trine 2's levels, but we were not actually after any logic. We were just after some variation. So we usually looked at what color the previous level was and then picked up another color for the next one. And we tried to do that also in between the levels and where we were in caves, open areas. So we tried to keep the levels and looks fresh all the time for the player. This is an example of the level artist. I don't know how well this can be seen, but here we have some ornament in the back wall. Which, when I saw this level after Teemu, our level artist had worked, I was wondering what the hell it was, because we hadn't done anything like that. And this is the close-up of that ornament, and it turned out this was actually a gameplay element for some whole totally different area, and that is a pillar I made myself, and I didn't recognize it from you. Here we have some quick samples of the variation in between levels. This is our sea rock castle level. We start out on the beach, we find some ruins, we go diving, then we recycle assets again. We made the sea floor basically a castle ruins because it was cheap. Here we have an introduction to some tentacle monster, which maybe could be found later on. Here is our dynamic weather. We change the weather. We have rain, lighting changes, everything. Just most of the assets are the same in the beginning and here later on, but it will make a tremendous difference when you can change the lighting and the weather. And here we have the octopus, which is one of the things we wanted to do was to have in each and every level some kind of hero, asset hero piece, something to remember the level by. And this was it in the Sea Rock Castle. Of course, this is an epic fight in the end. There's the Goblin King and his altar. And we have, this is one of the few 3D cutscenes we had. But basically, again, very cheaply done. We are using the level in the background and the assets. Thank you.